Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Kamma Chav Zayin. We're going to start on Chavav Amabeis 26b, 5 lines from the bottom. Today's Daf Yomi should be a Shemira for all of Am Yisrael. It should be a Yeshua for all the hostages, should be released speedily from captivity. May Hashem guard over all of the Chayalim who are trying to protect all Jews around the world. So we're on the bottom of 26b. Amar Rabba says the following, 5 lines from the bottom. Zarak Tinok, Rachmana Litzlan, somebody throws a baby from a roof, the Rosh Hagag. Uba Achar, somebody else comes along, the Kibla B'Sayif, and so the baby would not have survived the fall, but another person comes along and kills the baby with a sword before this baby actually hits the fall. So that's the Pukta Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira with the Rabbanan. That's a dispute between Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira and the Rabbanan. The Tanya, because we learned in a Brisa, Hikau Asar B'nei Adam Asar Makos. What about if 10 men hit one person with 10 sticks? Either at once or one after the other, Kulan Peturin, then none of them are liable for murder. All of them are going to be exempt. Why is that? Why are they all exempt? So Rashi explains on the top of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, Dibayinon Sheyake Kol Nefesh Adam, Kol Nefesh, because the pasuk says Yake Kol Nefesh Adam means to say you have to kill the whole person. And here there's no strike that is on itself killing the person, and so therefore they're going to be exempt. Some Achronim want to draw a distinction. What if they all use the same stick? Then they all put their hands on one stick. That's a different discussion, but I just want to point out that how careful you have to read each of these sources. But Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira says, he says, no, if they all struck each other one after the other, the last one will be liable because he brought about his death in a closer manner. So according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira, this person who stuck the knife into the baby as the baby's falling would be liable, even though the baby was going to fall anyway and die, because he brought about his death. And they shakir of Misa, so he brought out closer. So Gemara says, Ba Shor, what about in the case if an ox came, Vikiblo Bikarnov, and the ox caught this person in his horns and killed him? So that's a dispute between Rabbi Shmuel ben Ocher, Rabbi Yochanan ben Brocha, and Rabbanan. That's a dispute between Rabbi Shmuel, son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Brocha, and the Rabbanan. The Tanya, we have a discussion. We know that if your ox kills somebody, you have to pay kofar. Kofar is the ransom, the value of the person. Which person are you paying? So that's a machlokes, which we're going to, God willing, get to on Daf Mem. Do you pay the value of the person who the ox did the damage, the domain mazik, or do you pay the value of the person who was killed, the domain nizak? So it says in the Brisa, "V'nasan pidyon nafsho," he has to pay a ransom. Domain nizak, that the Tanna Kamma says you pay the value of the person being killed. Well, in this case, the value of the person being killed at this point is zero, because the dead man is falling to the ground. So there's nothing actually to pay, even though you're liable to pay, but there's no damages because there's no value there. Whereas Rabbi Shmuel ben Ocher, Rabbi Yochanan ben Brocha says, "Demei mazik." No, you pay the value of the mazik, the owner of the ox. Well, in this case, the owner of the ox has value, so he would pay it. Okay, now we have a case, which is one of the cases that people laugh at the Talmud. Chas v'shalom, they say the Talmud comes up with crazy scenarios, but of course, every case in the Talmud, first of all, has come true in history, but also every case in Talmud is to teach us legal principles. So Amar Rabba, the next case, Nafal me Rosh Hagag. Let's say a man falls off of a rooftop, and Rashi tells us what we're referring to here. Rashi is going to tell us in a moment, but Rashi tells us we're talking about a case where the man fell through his negligence. Through his negligence, that he was karov amazed, it was almost intentional, because it was a ruach mitzuya, so it was a common wind. So he fell off the rooftop, v'nitka be'isha. So then, and he falls into the woman. He has intercourse with the woman after he fell off the rooftop. Seems a little far-fetched, but crazier things in our history have happened. So chayev b'dalat varim, he has to pay, even though you don't pay, even though we said on the Chavav Amud Aleph at the bottom that you don't pay the Dalit Varim of Tsar, Ripoy, Sheves, and Boshes, you don't pay the pain, the medicine, the humiliation, and the lost wages when it's an accident. In this case, you would have to pay. You would have to pay because we're going to say that since it's Karav Mazid, it's not an accident because you really should have known about that, what happens on the rooftop, and you saw her there. The commentaries say. So then you have to pay not only damages, but also the extra expenses. It will be Vamaso, but if it would be the woman who he has to marry, his brother's widow, Lo Kana, he has not married her. And the reason is because there he has to have the intent to have intercourse. And since he didn't have that intent, so therefore he's not going to be, he has not acquired. It will be a Masa Lo Kana. What happens? So since it doesn't work, when Moshe Feinstein asked the question, well, let's say she gets pregnant from that action. Since then it was a prohibited relationship, is it a child of mamzer? That's a question Moshe Feinstein raises. But so what are the things he's liable for? Chayav ben nezek b'tzar b'ripoy b'sheves. We said he's liable for four things. It's not humiliation. Usually when you say four things, it excludes nezek because that's a given. But here it says the four things are damages, pain, medical expenses, and lost wages. Of a bochus low. Because but humiliation, he's not going to be liable for the humiliation he caused her. The Tanam, because as we learned, as we're going to learn the Mishnah on Pei Vav Amud Aleph, that or Pei Vav Amud Beis, that you're not liable for humiliation. Until you actually have intent to cause the humiliation. And certainly here he didn't intend. Let's say it was an uncommon wind. It was a hurricane that took you off. And he damaged her. You're there, you're only liable for the actual damages, but you're pater b'tzvalat varim. You're exempt from the other four things because you need to have karav amazing, almost intentional. And here it's just a pure accident. Beruach mitzuya, let's say it was a common action, a common wind. Fine, that's what we just said. If it was a common wind and you fell off, you did damage, you're exempt from humiliation, but you're liable for all the other categories of damages. But let's say on your way down, let's say on your way down, you turned yourself either to intentionally hurt him or maybe just to fall on him. So you intended to fall on him. Why? So that you wanted to cushion your fall. Well, there, since you intended to fall on him, you're also even liable for humiliation. Titania, Mimashma, Shenemar. We learn this from a brisa, which learns it from a pasuk, because the pasuk says when there were two men fighting and the woman stuck out her hand and grabbed a hold of his privates, it says V'shilcha yada. V'sholcha yada. This is in Deuteronomy 25. V'sholcha yada ve'achzika b'mevushav. She stuck out her hand. She grabbed a hold of his privates, but v'sholcha yada ini odea shechzika. When it says she stuck out her hand, of course she held. So with the word shechzika is extra. Matam omer v'chzika. So when we say we need intent to make you obligated for humiliation, that's as long as you have intent to do the damage, even though your intent was not to humiliate, you're going to be liable. The Rabbi says, let's say you put a coal on the heart of your friend, umeis, and then he dies, pater. You're not liable for murder, even though you put a hot coal on him, because he could have just taken it off and moved on. So you're not liable for murder. But al bigdo v'nitzraf, let's say you put on his clothing and his clothing burnt, chayiv, then you have to pay him. Why? Because he could have made the decision, okay, you put it on, now just pay me for it. And Rabba travayo tinaniyu, both of them are mishnayos. This statement says Rabba. The alibo, the fact that you're not liable if you put something on his heart. The Tanan, because it says in the Mishnah, we learned this Mishnah in Sanhedrin. It says in the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, Kava shalav v'tocha, or you stick him in a fire, or v'tocha mayim, and he stick him in water, and he can't get out from there and he dies, he's liable. But if he could have gotten up from the water or the fire and he just didn't, then you're going to be exempt. And bigdo, and how do we know you're exempt? Now, for the garment that the person has to pay, the Tanan, the man says, Karas Kusi, he says to him, tear my garment, shavaras kidi, or break my jug, chayev. Then we're going to say the man is liable because he says, okay, you do this and you'll have to pay me. So then the guy has to pay, but he says, amanas leftor, but if he says, do it and you won't have to pay, potter is exempt. So now, by Rabbi, let's say he puts a burning coal on the chest of his slave. What'll be the law there? Do we say that the slave, what's the status? Do we say kigufo dummy, that it's like a person, and so therefore he's not going to be liable for murder? Oh, kimono dummy, or do we say it's like his money, and therefore he's liable to pay for the damage he did to the slave? So do we say it's kigufo, and so therefore the slave could have run away, or it's like Mamono, and therefore he has to pay? Imtim tzomar kigufo. I mean, if you want to say it's like his body, shoroma. What if he put it on an ox? Is he liable to pay for the death of the ox? Or do we say the ox could have run away just like a slave could run away? Hadar pashta. So then Rava answered it, Avdo kigufo. The slave is like him himself, meaning to say he's not liable for the penalties because the slave could have easily taken off and moved away. But shoro is kumamono. But an ox is like his money. The Rashi says because the ox doesn't have the knowledge to remove the coal. The ox doesn't know how to do that. So we will return to you, okay, to the regel. In fact, we'll return to you at 8 a.m. this morning. But then, God willing, we'll return to you even before 7.5 years. But what a tremendous opportunity to study with everybody here 7.5 years from now. May Ken year, so may it be Hashem's will. So now we're beginning the next chapter, which is called Hamaniach. Baruch atah Adonai Melech HaMashiach, may it grow. Hamaniach Hasakad. This is the third chapter of Bava Kamma, of glorious Masechta. Somebody placed a kad. A kad is usually, you know where a kad is? Kad, kankan. A kad is a jug. You found a jug of oil. Hanukkah is coming up. But so kad is usually a jug, but you'll see there's a dispute here as to what it means. So Reuben placed his jug, Bereshus Harabim, in the public. Shimon comes along and slips on the jug, and Vishavra, and it breaks it. Potter. Shimon is going to be exempt because Reuben shouldn't have left it there. Vim huzak ba balabayis. But let's say vim huzak ba balachavis. But let's say the guy slipped on it. Vim huzak ba, the guy who was walking along. Reuben puts his jug in Shimon's. Okay, we're talking about here that Reuben placed a jug in public domain. If Shimon breaks it, Shimon is exempt. Let's say Shimon falls on it and he breaks his leg. The owner of the barrel is liable for the damage. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. We started talking about a kad, and then we concluded by talking about a chavis. Pasach bekad v'sim bechavis. Which is it? Is it a kad or is it a chavis? Is it a jug or is it a barrel? So the Gemara says, Vitna nami, and indeed we have two other Mishnahs where we have the same issue. Zeba b'chaviso v'zeba b'koroso. Let's say two men are walking in public. One walks with his barrel and one walks with his jug. Nishbro kadu shel zeh b'korosho shel zeh. One guy's jug breaks into the other guy's beam. He's potter. There too, we started with the barrel, we ended with the jug. Pasach b'chavis v'siyim b'kad. The same problem. And then again, we have a similar Mishnah. Vitna nami, we have another Mishnah. Zeba b'chaviso shel yain. Two people are walking in public. One guy's carrying his barrel of wine. V'zeba b'kadu shel dvash. And one guy's coming with his jug of honey. Nistika chavish shel dvash. If the barrel of honey broke, all of a sudden it's a barrel. V'shafach zeh yeno. One guy spills out his wine. V'hitzio has a dvash, and he saves the honey with soko. All he gets paid is for his labor. He doesn't get reimbursed for his wine. But there too, pasach bekad v'siyim b'chavis. It starts with the jug and it concludes with the barrel. What's going on here? So Rav Papa, hainu kad, hainu chavis. Rav Papa says, okay, to tell us they're the same thing. The kad and the chavis are the same thing. I was translating one as a jug, one as a barrel, but actually, technically speaking, they're the same thing. Gemara says, well, my nafkamina, why do we need all these mishnayos to teach us this idea that they're the same thing? That a guy, let's say a guy sends you a payment. He said he mails you $100. He said, send me a chavis. Well, the guy could send you a cod. The seller has the right, Rashi says, to sell you whichever one he wants. And even if the guy says specifically a chavis, he could still send him a cod, which is smaller. That's what Rashi says. So Gemara says, wait 1 second. What are we talking about? Hey, Chidami, what's the scenario? The asra the kado, if you want to place, if you want to say we're talking about a place, the kado or karo chavis, chavis or karo kado. If you want to say it's a place where they don't call it a kad a chavis, or they don't call a chavis a kad. Hello, Karwe. Certainly that's not the law there because they don't call it that. No, tzricha deruba karola kada. Kada that most people call a kada a kad. Uchavisa chavisa. Most people call chavis chavis. Vikanami, but there are some people to karo chavisa kada or kada chavisa. But there are some people in that town who call the chavisa the kada and or the kada the chavisa. So you might have said ma'odatema. You might have said zio basaruba. You might have said, let's follow the majority. The majority of people call a chavis and a kad. Let's follow the majority, and you can't switch it out. We see from here, Kamash Malan. No, the seller still has the right. This is Rashi's approach. The seller still has the right to give you whichever one he wants. The Ein Holchen, we're on the top of 27b. The Ein Holchen b'mamon achar rov. The seller still has the right because we don't follow, in the majority, we don't follow Ein Holchen b'mamon achar rov. We don't follow when it comes to money after the majority. The burden of the proof is upon you to say, I said specifically that barrel, not the jug, and the guy can't give you a jug. And so therefore, this is a fundamental principle. We say, you want to get that guy's money, you have to bring a proof. We don't follow the majority. Why don't we follow the majority? So that's what Tosfos says. Why don't we follow the majority? Why don't we say, let's follow just like by Dinei Nefashos? By capital cases, we follow the majority. So why don't we do it by Dinei Mamanos also? So the Gemara says, so Tosfos gives an answer. I don't want to get into it now, but Tosfos gives a beautiful answer explaining the distinction. I just wanted to point out Tosfos' question. So then the Gemara says, if somebody else comes along, if Reuven puts his barrel and Shimon slips on it and breaks it, Shimon is pater. So the Gemara asks the question, am I pater? Why is he exempt? He should have looked where he was going. What are you, an idiot? You see that there's a barrel in the road and you walk right over it and break it? Look where you're going. So we have to understand what's the ukimta here. But Tosfos already has another fundamental question. But why don't they say, didn't we just say earlier, didn't we say earlier that if somebody does something unusual, he does something he's not allowed, and the other person does the unusual thing, the second guy is exempt. So who cares if he walks right over it here? The first guy had no right to leave it there. So that's another quote Tosfos asks. So Tosfos gives his answer here. He says that if you were so negligent, we're not going to say that. The first answer Tosfos says is the Gabi Adam lo Amar Hachi. We don't say this by a person. By an animal, we would say it, but not by a person. A person has to have some knowledge of where he's walking. That's what Tosfos says. That's Tosfos' answer. He gives another answer that if it's so negligent, we wouldn't say it, but he says he doesn't say it by an Adam. And then the Tosfos says, so how do we explain? The guy should have known where he was walking. How do we deal with that? So the Gemara says, Shmuel says, okay, what's the circumstance here? He couldn't have known. So first of all, Amr Debei Rav, Mishmei Rav, B'Mamale, Rosh Hashanah, Kula Chavios. He had no way out of it. The whole place was filled with barrels. He had no recourse anywhere else. That's the first Okimta. Shmuel Amar Ba'Fela Shanu. Shmuel says, no, we're talking about a case, it was dark, so he couldn't see. Rabbi Yochanan says, B'Keren Zavis. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it was in the corner. It was in the corner, and so therefore he went like straight in, he couldn't have known. It was in a place, basically in the public domain, he couldn't have put it. And says Rav Papa, lo daika masnisin, ella oka shmuel oka Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav Papa says, from our Mishnah, we can only either say like Shmuel says it was dark, or like Rabbi Yochanan says it was in the corner, but not like Rav. The Ikarav, Mayur Yaniskal, Afilu Shiver. If you want to say it's like Rav who says he slipped, why would our Mishnah say that only this case? In that case, even if he broke them, Nami, he's also exempt because there's no way he was passing. So even if he broke it, he should have been exempt. Even if he intentionally broke it, meaning to say not only if he slipped and broke it, even if he intentionally broke it, because how else are we going to slip? How else is he going to pass by the street? You put your barrels and you're blocking me from walking down 16th Street. I have to break them. I have to get to work. So that's what Rav Papa is saying. So for the fact he doesn't say that, we say the law is not like, we say the law is not like Rav. The kimta of the case is not like Rav. So Gemara says, Amar Zid Mishmei de Rav. No, who I didn't have shavar. No, he would even be allowed to break it. But I did not got niskal. So the reason why it says he slipped is I did the bayla misnei sefer is because we want to say in the next clause, if he got hurt on it, on this barrel, then the owner of the barrel, i.e. Ruvain, will be liable, but nisko. The davka niskal, that's only if he slipped, would he have to pay for his own the damages. Aval shavar, let's say he intentionally broke it and he got damaged by breaking it. Well, my time, why not? Who is ignavshe? Because he damaged himself. So therefore, katani ration niskal. So because we want to say in the second clause, he slipped, to say that the owner is liable in a case where Shimon slipped, but not where Shimon intentionally broke it, then Reuven wouldn't be liable. Therefore, it says in the first case, Niskal. So Gemara says, okay, that's the first Ukimta. Why is the person, those are the first three Ukimtas, why is the person who fell into this, who fell on Reuven's barrel, going to be, why is the person who broke the barrel exempt? Because the guy had no right to put it there. So Amalei Rabbi Abba Rabbi Ashi Rabbi Ua. Why is he exempt if he breaks Shimon's barrel or Reuven's barrel? Why shouldn't he have looked? So he explains Lafi Shein Darkan Shal Bnei Adam was spoken b'drachim. Guys, no, you're not expected to watch where you're going. So since you're not expected to watch where you're going, therefore you're going to be exempt. So the first explanation is that it was dark, or it was corner, or else the whole place was filled with barrels. But now we're saying, no, person generally speaking doesn't know where he's going. Everybody texts while they walk. You're looking at the road, you're not looking at the street, at the floor. There was an incident in Nardai where a person slipped while he was walking on a barrel and he broke it. Shmuel said you have to pay. In Pumpadisa, Rava said you have to pay. I understand why Shmuel says you have to pay, because Shmuel says you're only exempt if it was dark. Ela Rava, why doesn't Rava? So do you want to say Rava Lema Shmuel Svirle? Do you want to say Rava holds like Shmuel, that he's strict like Shmuel, that you're only exempt if it's dark? So the Gemara says, no, Amar Papa Karna Da'atrayavi. No, it was the time of the olive press season. And so therefore everybody would be allowed to put their barrels outside. He had permission to put the barrel there. So therefore the guy should have been watching where he walked. So Rav Chisda said to message to Rav Nachman. They said, let's say you knee a person and damage them, then you have to pay 3 selas for the humiliation you gave him. And for kicking him, you have to give him 5. And if you struck him with the saddle of your donkey, you have to give him 13. So what do you have to pay him if you strike him with the wood of the hoe or the metal of the hoe? How much do you have to pay him? So when Rav Nachman heard this question from Rav Chisda, he responded, Chisda, Knasa kam Magvis Bavel, you're collecting penalties in Bavel? You're not supposed to do Knossos. You're not supposed to do these punitive damages in Bavel. Tell me what exactly is going on. So he said to him, this is what happened. Ugar Gusa debate tray. There was a pit which two people shared. To call Yoma each day, there was one person's day to collect the water from the well. Asachad Kadali Biyoma delay. One guy came along and he picked up the water when it wasn't his day. He stole the water. So I'm away. The other guy says to him, Yoma Didiu, it's my money. Lo ashkach. The other guy didn't pay attention. He says, I don't care, pound sand. Shakal Panda Demara Machye. So this guy who was really his water in the well that day, he took the hoe and he smacked him with it. So Rav Nachman said to Rav Chisda, not only my panda Michye, he said, Mea panda Michye. He said even 100 hits he could have given him. I feel, he was allowed to hit him. I feel even though there's a position that says, even though there's a position that says, even though we say that you're not allowed to do take the law into your own hands, but where you're going to lose money, case we're going to lose money. A person could take the matter into his own hands. Because if he didn't do it, the guy, if he would have said, oh, let me go to the court, the guy would have been, Rashi says, the guy would have been busy drawing water from the well. Or maybe the water will finish and he won't have a way to pay. So he has no choice. He's going to lose everything. So therefore, he can take the matter into his own hands. Of course, there's a lot of lumdus about that. What does it mean? A person can take the law into their own hands, but if he's actively losing money, the guy's coming, guy holds you up with a gun and says, give me your money. You're allowed to, I'm not saying that this is wise, but you're allowed to push him down. So you don't have to give him the money. But normally you're not allowed to push someone. So Rav Yehuda says you can't take the law into your own hands. Rav Nachman says Rav Nachman says you can. Where you're losing money, if he would take him to court to claim his money back, he wouldn't be able to recover it. Everybody says you could take the law into your own hands. Where do they argue? Where there's no loss of money. Rav Yehuda says, meaning to say, you can go to the court afterwards to get your money. You'll be able to recover. Rav Yehuda says, he says, Rav Yehuda says, person shouldn't take the matter into his own hands. He can't do it. The kivin the wake up say the lazel kame dayana, since there's no loss, let him go in front of the judge. Nachman says, Avid inishtino nafshe. No, he can take the matter into his own hands. The kivin the bedin Avid lo tarach, because since he's that he's allowed to do it, because since he's taking what's getting to him, it's his money. So therefore, he's not obligated to go all the way to the court to make his claim for the money. And so therefore, Rav Nachman says that you could take the matter into your own hands, which is ironic because Rav Nachman is the Av Bezdin, and the law is like Rav Nachman that says the Rambam, that a person can take the matter into his own hands, even if he wouldn't lose money. But he has to be able to prove that it's really his. So I just want to say one more thing. There's a fundamental dispute amongst the Rishonim about the parameters of this dispute. Do we say all of them allow you to grab his own money, but they argue whether or not you're allowed to strike the person, or do we say according to everybody you can't strike him unless you're losing money, and the only question is whether or not you can take back your money. So that's a fundamental dispute. But anyway, this is today's daf, a beautiful daf. Obviously, so many deep ideas here that you could spend a whole year just studying Bava Kamma Chav Zayin, one of the glorious daf of Shas. All right, we'll stop the recording here. For anybody has any questions, happy to address.